Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and dear friends, I am Fatima Tassise, a junior student from High Leadership Charter School in the Bronx. Ms. Rosa Almanzar and I will be your Masters of Ceremonies. Ms. Almanzar is a director of the Family Shelter of Project Hope in Boston, where she was at first a resident back in 1984. Together, we would like to welcome you all to this assembly to commemorate the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. I would also like to give a very special recognition to our guests who travel from very faraway countries and to the children and young people in the audience here today. One more note before we begin. This is a two-part commemoration. After we hear the delegates and activists, a moment of reflection will take place in the UN Gardens at the commemorative stone in honor of victims of extreme poverty. We will walk to the gardens and gather around the stone for this time of reflection. If you want to share the commemoration with others, you are welcome to join our Twitter conversation using the hashtag #EndPoverty and hashtag #StopPoverty.
Move over a little bit. 70 years ago, the Universal Declaration of Rights was signed on the Trocadero Plaza in Paris. This declaration captured the enduring spirit of the human family, setting for itself the task of ensuring for all its members freedom, justice, and peace by the recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal rights of each human being. In the same spirit, we gather today on the International Day of the Eradication of Poverty to express our will to come together with those furthest behind, to build an inclusive world, universal respect for human rights and dignity. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, your presence among us today is a sign of your commitment to end everywhere the violations of human rights, violations that are caused and consequences of extreme poverty, violations that too many of us here today continue to face and to resist. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am now pleased to introduce to you His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
Dear friends, thank you very much. I have to apologize. I'm going to do one of the most impolite things that can be done. And I was always very angry when going to meetings and seeing leaders coming, talking and leaving. But unfortunately, because I have a Security Council luncheon, that is exactly what I have to do today. That's not lack of respect. I'll be delighted to be here to fully participate in the meeting. But unfortunately, I will have to join the Security Council immediately afterwards. It is indeed a pleasure to be here today to observe the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. We have come a long way since the world first commemorated this day 25 years ago. Nearly 1 billion people have been lifted out of poverty thanks to political leadership, inclusive economic development and international cooperation. However, too many are still being left behind. 10% of the world's population remain in extreme poverty, and in our world of plenty, more than 700 million people are unable to meet their basic daily needs. Armed conflict hinders further progress in poverty eradication and can quickly undermine many hard-won gains. Discrimination and rising inequalities also pose major challenges. Women's unequal access to opportunities has real impacts, not just on their lives, but on families and communities as well. Youth, older people, indigenous peoples, people with disabilities and migrants are also disproportionately affected. And every year, disasters push millions of people around the world into poverty. More than ever, we can see the urgency of climate action and efforts to build resilient societies. The deprivations that people living in poverty endure every day remind us that there is a fundamental connection between eradicating extreme poverty and upholding the equal rights of all people. Ending extreme poverty is not a matter of charity. It is a question of justice. This year, as we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the landmark Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is timely to recall the Declaration's proclamation of freedom from want as being among the highest aspirations of the world's people. In adopting and now implementing the 2030 Agenda, the international community recommitted itself to this aspiration as embodied in the first of the Sustainable Development Goals, to end poverty in all forms, everywhere. Poverty is not inevitable. It is not a natural state of being or occurrence. It is most often the outcome of choices that societies have made. And today we must choose to build a fair globalization that creates opportunities for all. Inclusive growth, supported by economic and social policies that empower people and provide equal opportunities, make the difference. We need policies that create a strong enabling economic environment and that promote access to education, health services, decent work and social protection to everybody. And we need policies that dismantle barriers that contribute to the perpetuation of poverty. The International Day also honours the struggles and activism of people living in poverty. We must do more to listen to them, address the indignities they face, and tackle the power structures that prevent their inclusion in society. Let us join hands to end poverty, advance human rights, and uphold the core pledge of the 2030 Agenda to leave no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. Your message of hope and strength will continue to inspire us all and lead us in our commitment to build a world universal respect for human rights and dignity. His Excellency, Mr. Antonio, has other pressing commitment he must attend at this time, but we highly value him for honoring us with his presence and participation at this important occasion. Excellency, again, thank you very much for having joined us today.
We are honored now to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Inga Rhonda King, President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. As we know, the Economic and Social Council is at the heart of the United Nations system to advance the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. Please, Excellency.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to join you on this International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. On behalf of the Economic and Social Council, I wish to express my gratitude to the organizers of and participants in this important event, which focuses on matters including participation, inclusion, empowerment, and eradication of poverty that are at the heart of our mission at the ECOSOC. I am pleased that the outcome of today's special meeting will be used as an input to the HLPF, that is the 2019 High-Level Political Forum, to be held under the auspices of the ECOSOC, as well as to be held under the auspices of the General Assembly. ECOSOC has long recognized the critical importance of broad participation in its processes. Indeed, the first time that non-governmental organizations took a role in formal UN deliberations was through the Economic and Social Council in 1946. And since that time, ECOSOC has served as a gateway for NGO participation in UN intergovernmental efforts touching a range of sustainable development issues. The phrase, "nothing about us, without us," created by persons with disabilities, has often been used by different groups that have also, too often, been left out of decision-making processes that affect them. This sentiment is well understood at the United Nations, which is ever seeking to innovate its approaches to facilitate broad participation in its work. One recent success was the process for the development of the 2030 Agenda. Excuse me, which is often considered the largest consultation process in the history of the United Nations. For this reason, the 2030 Agenda proclaims itself of the people, by the people, and for the people. But more must be done to ensure the participation of those living in poverty in the United Nations and other processes that affect their lives. As we celebrate the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty today, we recognize that more than 700 million people living in extreme poverty. Extreme working poverty also remains widespread. In 2017, more than 300 million workers in emerging and developing countries had a per capita household income or consumption below $1.90 per day. Ending poverty in all of its forms and dimensions everywhere is at the center of the 2030 Development Agenda, set out in the very first of the Sustainable Development Goals. Indeed, the commitment of the international community to eliminating poverty is high, as reconfirmed by the General Assembly, proclaiming the third United Nations Decade for Eradication of Poverty, 2018 to 2027. We firmly believe that to find effective approaches to ending poverty, those experiencing it must have a seat at the table and be given the tools to empower themselves and participate fully. With this in mind, the theme of the 2019 HLPF, empowering people and ensuring inclusiveness and equality, could not be more appropriate. The ECOSOC will focus on empowering people to build equal and inclusive societies. I wish to encourage all stakeholders to participate in both HLPF and ECOSOC processes. One of the ways that the UN currently promotes such participation and inclusivity is through the system of ECOSOC accreditation of NGOs. This enables more than 5,000 NGOs to attend and contribute to UN meetings, seeking to eliminate the inequalities that can hinder full participation. The accreditation system particularly prioritizes applications from NGOs from developing countries. We are also exploring other avenues of increasing participation of those living in poverty and would particularly welcome today your suggestions in this regard. I am very optimistic that by working together, we will continue to strengthen the meaningful participation of those living in poverty, and in doing so, we will bring to life the promise of the 2030 Agenda to leave no one behind. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency, for placing the eradication of poverty at the core of your mandate. We are grateful for your words and your support.
I will now turn the floor over to His Excellency, Mr. Francois Delattre, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of France to the United Nations.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's such an honor for my team, Ayed Zegar and others, and for me to be here with you this afternoon on this very special and important occasion. As we today celebrate the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, we are, as was eloquently said by the Secretary General, at the very heart of what the UN is all about. Indeed, the fight against, or the fight for the eradication of poverty is the mother of our common fights for peace, for the development, and for human rights and dignity. This is the key to everything. That's why the eradication of poverty is front and center for us all and for the United Nations. In the same spirit, we are gathered here today not only to pay tribute to the victims of extreme poverty, but to hear their voice and their message, because you are key partners for peace, for the development, and for the human rights and dignity. We just cannot make it collectively without you, and we need you to succeed on these various fronts. This is the core of my message today. I'm so sorry I will have also to leave with the Secretary General to attend the Security Council meeting in a few moments, but I'd like to start by thanking the Secretary General not only for his very inspiring words, but for his day-to-day commitment to the fight that you hold so dear. We are working very close together, and when the SG was at the HCR, it was the same, a fight for the human dignity that you so well epitomize. I would especially like also to thank the NGO ATD Carmonde, ATD Fourth World, without whom this commemoration would simply not have taken place. ATD Fourth World's commitment to the eradication of poverty is a source of admiration and inspiration to all of us, and certainly to me. And the team here is really the dream team in this fight that we're all committed to. I warn you, never say no to them. It's impossible. More broadly, France has always been and will always remain a partner to the NGOs fighting against extreme poverty. I also want to express my warmest thanks to my colleague from Burkina Faso, His Excellency Ambassador Thiaré, to the teams of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, to the NGO Committee for Social Development, and to the International Committee for October the 17th for their invaluable support in organizing this event, but also, and more importantly, for their exemplary commitment. France's battle against poverty at the UN took a new start in 1989 when the Human Rights and Extreme Poverty Resolution was adopted by the Human Rights Commission. This was really, I would not say the beginning of everything, but again, a new start. Ever since, France, and you know the long tradition of French modesty and humility, which is really part of our DNA, but on a more serious note, ever since, France has been constantly assisting any enterprise aimed at reducing extreme poverty worldwide to ensure that everyone could fully enjoy their human rights. Because again, this is, in our view, the mother of every fight we are here to fight. This year, the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty has a special significance, as 2018 is also the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted in Paris on December 10th, 1948. The right to a decent life and human rights are indeed inextricably linked. In that vein, the stress must now be on vulnerable populations so we can make sure everyone enjoys his or her rights to the fullest. as 800 million people were living under the poverty threshold in 2017, the UN has made the eradication of extreme poverty one of the pillars of its Agenda 2030 for sustainable development, as was said by both previous speakers, including the chair of ECOSOC. I will conclude by saying that you can count on me. More importantly, you can count on France, you can count on President Macron to stay at the forefront of international efforts in this existential fight for each and every one of us. If we truly partner with those who know firsthand what extreme poverty means on a day-to-day basis, then, my friends, we will win together this battle. Un grand merci à chacun. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Excellency, for your constant support. We are grateful for your commitment to listen to our voices, your determination to build peace and foster our community. Humanity is a source of inspiration for all of us.
I am pleased to welcome now Mr. Salehi Musa Seif, an ATD Fourth World volunteer from Tanzania, who will share his deep commitment to his community. He will also be speaking on behalf of Ms. Asha Mohammed, who should have been a speaker today, but was not able to travel to New York because her visa got denied.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Before I came here, Asha told me people living in extreme poverty often humiliated and disrespected. When my visa was refused, I felt that my rights were violated, that I do not have an equal opportunity to travel and belong to a large world. They told me they cannot give me a visa because of my income, and they did not believe that I would come back to my country after the October 17th event. I was very disappointed. I believed that I would meet different people with different experiences and believed that I would share my knowledge and my experience and learn from others as well. Asha was refused a visa because her worth as a person and her human dignity did not have value. Of course, she has no money, and they judged her based on that. If an academic had wanted a visa, they would be happy to provide one, because an academic would be recognized as contributing a knowledge, but Asha has knowledge to contribute to. People living in poverty are not trusted, even if they tell the truth. They have no chance to express themselves. For example, some of my friends were caught suspected of doing something wrong, but it has been almost 5 years and they have not been judged yet. They have been locked up and forgotten. I just try and encourage the relative of my friends to continue to visit them in prison. If human rights and dignity were respected, those friends of mine would have come before a judge. Poverty forces you to make a choice that you know are not what you want for yourself and your family. Asha told me, I was one of the good students despite poverty and struggle. However, my mother had to advise me to fail the national exam. She was worried about the cost for the secondary school because she was alone. Because of loneliness, of extreme poverty. In my country, if a child passes the national exam, and the parents don't bring him or her to the secondary school, they would go to jail. And it is also a shame for parents if their child passes the exam and they don't bring them to the secondary school. What other choice did Asha's mother have? Parents who work at the stone quarry also cannot make the choice they want for their children. People who work in the quarry are considered the lowest. They risk their lives, they work very hard, but what they get from their work is very little. So, to help support their parents and to increase the household income, children do not go to school regularly. But they end up getting sick because of the dust, and then the families suffers more because they have to struggle to cure them. I think there should be a policy to support the people living in extreme poverty to avoid this situation. If parents have enough security, for example, if they are sure of having food, they would not allow their children to work at the quarry, they would send them to school. Sometimes security provided, but it does not involve the right people. Those who get that support already have a little bit. People who live in poverty are not beggars. They don't complain. They don't come forward and say, I need help. Often they work hard, they do their best to hide their poverty, to make sure they wear clean clothes. It is a way of defending themselves. So how can they be reached by the protection system? It is not enough to ask, is your house a mud house? It is a question of people participating in the community. The people in the community, they know themselves. They can say who should be helped. When we come together, we practice solidarity and respect for every human by acting, by doing it, not by preaching. When we say coming together, it often includes only people who are not in poverty. Coming together must also include those who are experiencing poverty, because they are often left behind for many reasons. But they are the ones who live in poverty, and they have contributions to make and opinion about what works better for their lives. When the human rights and the dignity of everybody are taken into account, the world will have a sustainable peace and love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Steve, for presenting such a profound message. We will now listen to a message by Ms. Kim Cook, an activist from Boston, who will tell us how she tries to build caring relationships in challenging environments.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Cook. I was pregnant when I first went into a shelter. At first, the Department of Transitional Assistance couldn't help me. They said I didn't need a shelter. I could sleep on someone's couch. I only got into a shelter when I showed up with my infant son in February and told them, I have nowhere to go. I am going to be out on the street with a 2-month-old tonight, in the middle of winter. I've been in a shelter for 5 years now. They were giving out housing vouchers, but I was not eligible because my last permanent address wasn't a Boston address. The shelter I am in now is infested with mice. People break the rules and have cats that control the mice, and the shelter lets them do it. In the welfare hotel we were in before, there was no kitchen, just a tiny microwave and a fridge. Microwaving food is not a healthy way to raise children, but that was the only choice we had. I got a crock pot, but they took it and said they would return it when we moved out because crock pots were not allowed. It seems like a lot of the system is built to keep people in poverty. For example, there's a limit to how much money you can save. If you have more than $2,000, your benefits get cut off. But it costs more than $2,000 to get an apartment. You need first month's rent and a security deposit. How am I supposed to save for an apartment if I can't have more than $2,000? There are assistance programs, but it is not feasible for families to get assistance with all the hurdles they have to jump. Sometimes I feel like policies are put into place more to protect the system from abuse than to lift people up. My children are half Native American. We lost our state health insurance for 2 months because they said I didn't send in the necessary paperwork to prove that they were Native American. With Massachusetts health insurance, there are no extra benefits for being Native American. Why did I have to get all these documents? In the end, they listed my kids as white. I got my health insurance back by hiding who they truly are for the bureaucracy. I think it's partially discrimination, but it's also a lack of trust. At the dentist, it was either live with a rotting tooth or pay $1,500. In the end, I went to a dental school where a student worked on me. They got hands-on training, and I got the tooth removed. When you live in poverty, you have to know those strategies. Otherwise, you can't get what you need and access your basic rights. I know homeless couples who are in the street because they are not legally married and can't go to a shelter together. I know a 17-year-old teenager who is out on the street because family shelters won't take males over 17. There are so many faces of humanity being ignored because of poverty. In Boston, most public bathrooms close at 5 p.m. After 5, there is nowhere for people living on the street to even wash their hands. There should be access to basic necessities, regardless of income or housing status. The homeless community says this is just how it is. The bureaucrats won't listen to us. We vote, but things aren't changing the way we want. Why am I settling for that? Why am I not crying out, this is a crime against humanity? This is degrading. I want to be part of changing the system. I volunteer every week with a program that has free lunch and art programs for the homeless. I can always help people in some way. I buy them a cup of coffee when I have the money. They struggle and get down, and I say, it's going to get better. Just keep hanging in there. The only thing that gets us through each day is that we rely on each other. We are stronger together. Really, we're a family. While I live in the shelter, I'm trying to give my kids as normal a life as possible. I may not be able to afford everything, but I want my children to have diverse learning experiences. They know they live in a shelter, but they don't feel any different than their friends at school. I don't want them to feel they missed out on something because of our financial situation. Children are the ones that will carry us into the future, so we need to raise them right. I pride myself on raising my children without discrimination. I teach them that everyone is the same. It doesn't matter if they look different, if they speak different, everyone is the same. That is a very important lesson that needs to be spread. There can be discrimination against people who receive public assistance or have government health insurance. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that's ingrained in us. It's something that's taught. This is a vital step for people to get out of poverty. It's a struggle, but it's worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cook, for sharing your deep commitment to human dignity.
To continue, we would like to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Yamdago Eric Thierry, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Burkina Faso to the United Nations. The Permanent Mission of Burkina Faso, along with the Permanent Mission of France, are co-sponsors for this International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Please, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will ask you a favor because I will try to read my speech in English, but you will notice that it's not a good, it will not be a good English, but I will try. So first of all, I want to thank you very much for being here. And as my predecessor said, it's a pleasure for us and for me, for Burkina Faso, to be associated to this event. It's, again, this year, we have come together to commemorate the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, an honorable and valued purpose that we have undertaken for decades now. Extreme poverty means living on less than $1.90 per day. But the reality is much more complex in that it removes from people living in poverty any opportunity to reach their full potential. On this commemorative day, while we acknowledge and applaud the progress already made in the struggle against poverty, we must also recognize that the struggle is far from being won, given the disturbing statistics we receive at each step of evaluation. In fact, according to estimates, more than 700 million, my predecessor already said that, people still live in extreme poverty and strive to satisfy their most basic needs, such as health, education, and access to water and sanitation. Likewise, in 2016, only 45% of the global population is effectively covered by at least one social benefit. Not only are the success noted in the struggle inadequate, unequal, and imbalanced, but also it is clear that poverty spares no region of the world. According to the World Bank, South Asia and Sub-Saharan African account for about 70% of the global population living in extreme poverty. At the same time, middle income and developed countries are not spared either. At the present time, 30 million children grow up in poverty in the richest countries of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, the moving statements that we have here just after the two activists immediately are above all cannot and should not leave us indifferent. How can we understand and how can we admit that in our world today there exists so much injustice, inequality, suffering, and humiliation, and also often scorn and indifference toward the disturbed of men, women, and above all, children, the people who are the future of the world? If the people who are supposed to take on the world of tomorrow grow up in such conditions, what will the future look like? This is why we must work together to make up lost time, because eradicating extreme poverty is not impossible. In this regard, Africa is increasing its initiatives to create growth that is inclusive, sustainable, and share throughout the continent. As an example, During the African Union Summit held last July, the head of state signed an agreement to create a new free exchange zone which will serve eventually to make the African economies more competitive and to stimulate intra-African commerce. The head of state also recognized the need to reform the African Union so that it will make a greater contribution to the prosperity of the continent. And they agree that Africa, with all its potential, should take ownership of its own future. In addition, African countries clearly defined the areas that need more investment, like education, health, employment, and the empowerment of young people, along with support for their civic participation and their representation within governments. The countries also agreed to stimulate key investment in agriculture with the aim of creating millions of new jobs, of increasing profitability and of fighting hunger and malnutrition. So, ladies and gentlemen, we commemorate today, this October 17, on the theme coming together with those futures behind to build an inclusive world of universal respect for human rights and dignity. This theme reminds us of the importance of helping each person to regain dignity, of promoting solidarity to improve our lives together, and of offering pathways to more integration of each segment of society, above all the most disadvantaged people. More than ever, it is urgent to us to take action. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Thierry. Again, we appreciate the continued support from the Permanent Mission of Burkina Faso for the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty.
Now we shall listen to a musical interlude. This song is called Be Change, and it features testimonies of people living homeless in Dublin. Please welcome Grammy winner, singer, songwriter, and executive director of Koala Foundation, Susan McKeon, and Michael Brunach, singer and songwriter.
Thank you. I'd like to thank ATD Fourth World for commissioning me to write this song, which I wrote based on the testimonies of people living homeless in Dublin. And since I wrote the song, homelessness has been escalating in Dublin due to structural economic factors. What's alarming to many people in Ireland is the amount of families that have become homeless in Dublin, my hometown, in the last 3 years. It has risen 18% in the last year alone. And my organization is working with organizations like ATD in Dublin, SAIL Women's Project, Rialto Youth Project, Donegal Travellers Project, and Monaghan Integrated Development that works with people living in direct provision to amplify those voices and develop creative solutions to the problems we face today, to make sure everyone is included, because we all belong. All the bad things happened in my life. They don't tell you a thing about who I am. Don't judge me, just be there for me. If you really want to learn.
Though I need help, there is no one to blame. Got to stand up rise above the shame. What I see around me is injustice. What I see ahead of me is love.
And if you wanna be changed, then we have to stand up together. And if you wanna see change, then we have to speak up together. And if you wanna be changed, then we have to stand up together. And if you wanna see change, being homeless is like being handcuffed. All my power was taken away. How can I show my face to my children when I couldn't give them a home?
I have known homelessness all generations, my parents too. A family, we are one. To know this gets us through.
And if you wanna be changed, then we have to stand up together. And if you wanna see change, then we have to speak up together. And if you wanna be change, it's not gonna come while you're waiting. And if you wanna be changed,
hold on to what you know.
and if you wanna be changed,
hold on to what you know.
if you wanna be changed, if you wanna be changed, just hold on to what you know is true. Just hold on to what you know is true.
Thank you, Ms. McKeon and Mr. Brannock, for sharing so generously your time and talents in this powerful song. We will now listen to a message of Mr. Patrick Matara from Kibera, a large slum outside Nairobi, Kenya. We will hear how passionate he is about making a difference in children's lives.
Good afternoon, all. Today, I will share my story. I think story inspires people and sometimes can change them. I grew up in a very humble family in rural Kenya. My dad left my mom and 6 siblings, so my mom raised me. When I reached secondary school, I was unable to go to school because we could not afford the school fees. I was devastated because I did very well in primary school and I saw my friends going to school. I thought, this is my end. Then I said to the God that I always pray to, I know one day, sometime, I will be in school again. I decided to go to Nairobi to look for my dad. It was a challenge. Where could I find him? After a month and a half, I finally found my father. I was very bitter when I first saw him, but I didn't want to show him my feelings. So I told him why I was looking for him. I wanted to go to school. My dad used to drink at that time, but I talked with him so much that he stopped. he found the sense to take me to school. With his support, I finished high school. I even found someone who sponsored me to go to university. There I met Sister John, my professor. She challenged me. She inspired me. I used to think that you have to have money to give back to the society. She taught me that I didn't need money. I had other resources that I can use to transform my society. I can use my time and energy since I'm young. That's what the resource that I have. I realized that there are children who will never have a big brother to talk to in Kibera. They will not have someone who can be their voice, who can teach them, who can work with them, and teach them their rights and responsibility of human beings. That really inspired me to invest in children of Kibera, a very large slum of Nairobi. There are so many children who are struggling, and as a young adult, it was my responsibility to make them play and so by talking and playing with them, the group I belong to gives them hope. I tell them my story and how I was able to go to school. It challenges them and pushes them not to feel hopeless, unwanted, and useless. It is something that has touched me in Kibera. Children go through many problems, and they need somebody who can stand up for them, walk with them, work with them, speak with them, and show them the way. When I think about the fathers behind, the ones who comes to mind are the children who have been discriminated against, isolated, and left in the streets. I work with Edmond Rice Karibu Group to find those who are left behind. One day, a group of children we work with told us about a child and her mother. We decided to visit them. We met the 16-year-old girl, and I noticed that she was mentally disabled. At first, she was not comfortable sharing with us because it was our first time in their family. But the second time, she started opening up about her challenges and how she was discriminated and isolated. Her father died when she was 7 years old. After she was born, her mother went to a clinic for a checkup and she was told they both been infected with the HIV/AIDS. Then a doctor wanted to take the child and give her mother another home. The mother refused. When people in the community learned they were infected, they stopped visiting and talking to her. The woman became depressed. She thought about leaving her daughter. Through time and friendship, we connected them with a center our group works with. The mother was recovering and her daughter went to school, but some people still abused her. When we found out she was being abused, we reported the case to the police and they took action and they apprehended the man. Now the man is behind the bars. He did not realize that sleeping with the girl could infect him too. This girl and her mother are kind of people who are left behind. We must befriend the marginalized. When people experience challenges and injustice, we need to come together to address the problem. If we work as a team, we can win. We will accomplish our goal of eradicating poverty. Human beings should be treated with dignity. It is a responsibility to value every human and respect them for who they are, to treat them equally. Children like the ones whose story I shared today need to be protected. We need to respect their dignity and value them. We give them value by helping them realize their potential and ability by addressing their needs. If they need education, how can we help them at school? That shows we value them. Another way we can give value to somebody is making them realize how important they are. Even if they don't have anything, even if they aren't even in school, even if their parents died, they are valuable. My hope is that children I am friends with realize that life means and how precious they are to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Matara, for sharing your inspiring message of hope and your commitment to be a friend of children who are left behind. Please, let me now invite on stage Ms. Stacy White, Fourth World activist from New York City. She will tell us how strongly she feels that everyone should be treated with equal respect.
Good afternoon. People in poverty are not the lowest of the low. I live with my daughter in a shelter in Queens, New York City. I'm doing my best to look for permanent housing to stay outside of the shelter system. Throughout my life, I have lived in poverty-stricken areas. For me, poverty is about neglected areas, areas that are not taken care of, where there are no resources for families, like libraries, good schools, or even good stores. In the stores, most of the groceries are expired, including potato chips and sodas. The store owners think we're content with living this way because they think we do not have a voice. But this is not the case. People in poverty living have this fear that if they open their mouths, then action will be taken against them, so no one says anything. So we're going to continue to have stores like that unless people in poverty let their voices be heard, so others are stopping to take advantage of them. In these places where sidewalks are cracked and infrastructures are broken, it's important that we stand up for our rights, that we voice our needs, make noise to get what we have the right to have. We have to make noise. I don't mean being loud, being violent, cursing people out, belittling people. I mean going to meet people, because a piece of paper is just not going to work. You have to go down there and stay in their face and keep staying in their face. You have the right to claim your right. It's important because it's only right. Everyone should have the right to speak, to say how they feel about what is going on in their life. It's a human right to be heard and to listen to someone, to communicate with one another. A lot of times I have had the feeling I was not heard. When I went into the shelter system, I was told I was giving them false information, but they weren't trying to hear that, talking above me and raising their voices. They don't listen because a lot of people go by status. If you have a job and I don't, I'm lower. If I live in projects and you own a home, I'm lower. If you have better shoes, I'm lower. So if we're not on the same level, people don't want to be bothered. Often I get the impression that some people are not properly trained for their jobs. When you're working a job that requires customer service or dealing with people, you have to be trained to deal with it all. Inside poverty-stricken neighborhoods, to stop the violence, people need to bring it out in the open and stop keeping it inside. If we don't get together to say something about it, violence will keep happening. We in our community only make noise if a black person is killed by a police officer. We don't say anything when we kill each other. In the neighborhoods where I'm from, this happens every day, every other day, but we don't say anything. Because first, people are scared of retaliation. And second, some police officers think, let them kill themselves. We need peacemakers in our neighborhoods because some people don't feel secure or safe enough to tell the police. We have to find someone we can fully trust who will listen to us, and then maybe someone the police will listen to, because they're not going to listen to people in the neighborhoods, people in poverty. My mother would play that role. My mother didn't care what color you were. If you're in trouble, and that's it. That taught me to raise my kids with respect, and that's why I have respect for everyone. She had a lot of impact on me. Now, if I see somebody fighting, if it's not a violent fight, but something I can resolve, I try to resolve it. Nobody deserves to be put down because of where they're from, what color they are, how much they make, or what they eat. I don't feel disrespected too much. When someone tries to disrespect me, it feels like a raincoat that gets wet and the rain rolls off, because I know who I am, I know where I came from, and I am proud of who I am. Respect starts at home with a very caring adult. Kids are bullied so much. If you tell your child to stand on your own 2 feet and you are perfectly fine the way you are, when he is being bullied, he will just walk away with a please, get out of my face with that. But if a parent or a caring adult doesn't let them know that, then that child is going to absorb the bullying until the pressure becomes too much. Let's see what their art and their talent is. You have to help your child be confident. It's same for our LGBT young people. A lot of them are killing themselves, turning to drugs, or living in the street because their parents are not accepting. When you have a child, love is unconditional. Homeless people also deserve respect. Anyone who has any care in the world for people should let them know where they can find help. I tell people where they can find support. Also, simply saying hello to someone makes a world of a difference. Everyone can and should come together. All it takes is one person to take the first step. Usually another follows behind. It's not too hard to follow in someone's footsteps. What is hard is to take that first step to tell other people. So today, I'm telling you, do not be afraid to take that first step. Let's come together and make a difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. White. Your commitment to come together with one voice to create change is very inspiring. Thank you. I am now pleased to introduce to you Mr. Donald Lee, the President of the International Committee for October 17. Mr. Lee will share with us the message of the committee.
Excellencies, dear friends, first of all, thank you for those very powerful messages we heard today. We are deeply touched. This year, we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. However, despite the progress achieved in human rights since then, the adoption of this landmark document has been widely recognized. We still find ourselves deeply concerned that people living in poverty, especially those furthest behind, are still disproportionately affected by human rights violations. Joseph Rosinski was one of the first persons to highlight the critical connection between extreme poverty and human rights violation by demonstrating that a human rights approach to end poverty was the most effective way to guarantee that people in poverty could live in dignity and enjoy basic human rights and freedoms. This approach forces us to look beyond providing an adequate income for people in poverty and to also focus on the dignity, capabilities, choices, security, and voice that every individual needs for the full enjoyment of their fundamental civil, cultural, economic, political, and social rights. In so doing, we recognize and respect the important mutual roles and relationships we have with each other based on our common and equal dignity. An important tool in the fight against extreme poverty is the Guiding Principles on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, which is intended to ensure that public policies reach persons living in poverty, respect and uphold their rights, and address the significant social, cultural, economic, and structural obstacles to the enjoyment of human rights. The theme, coming together with those furthest behind to build an inclusive world of universal respect for human rights and dignity, reminds us that our civic and moral duty is to defend the human rights of all people, especially those furthest behind. It also reminds us that only a world free from poverty will provide the enduring foundation for building peaceful and inclusive societies. Every year since 1987, people from all walks of life have come together on October 17 to observe the World Day for Overcoming Extreme Poverty as an occasion to renew their commitment to defending the human rights of people living in poverty and to stand in solidarity with all people who strive to eradicate extreme poverty. By coming together each year on October 17, people who experience extreme poverty have been able to break the silence of poverty and to speak out against the pain of exclusion, discrimination, injustice, and violence. These important values of voice, participation, and solidarity, which are actively promoted by the commemoration of October 17 each year at the UN and around the world, strongly complement and support the ambition of the United Nations Agenda 2030 to mobilize all stakeholders in the fight against poverty and to promote the full and active participation of people living in poverty. The International Committee for October 17, in its Rome Declaration in May 2018, called upon the UN to reassess the contribution of the observance of the International Day to the mobilization of all stakeholders in the fight against poverty. The committee also called upon the UN to urgently consider establishing a mechanism at the United Nations to ensure the effective participation and voice of people living in poverty. Only by creating and nurturing a genuine relationship with people living in poverty will it be possible to build an inclusive world where all people can enjoy their full human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, and the International Committee for October 17th for imparting the wisdom and the constant reminder of the roots of our work. We would like to thank again all the speakers as well as everyone who came to participate. Thank you. We shall now move into the second part of our program. It will be held in the UN Garden. Please go to the exit behind you to my right as we will begin in 10 minutes. Thank you.